I didn't
All
memorize
right.
them.
We have a revised list.
Is this an assignment or?
No, we're just doing
Extracurricular.
Okay.
This is a.
Okay.
Okay, so our first question is going to be, what natural disasters are you prepared for?
Well, we respond to the consequences of natural disasters more than we do natural disasters themselves. So, for example, the most common natural disaster that we have around here is damage that results from either tornado or high winds. Now, an actual sighting of a touchdown tornado in our jurisdictional area is not something I can ever actually remember. But we do fairly often, at least maybe once a year, maybe sometimes several times a year, experience what are referred to as straight line winds, if you've heard of them. In other words, they don't have any of the cyclonic activity to them that's common to a hurricane, but straight line winds at the 50, 60, 70 mile an hour range. In fact, about a month ago, on September 11th of all days, was the last time we experienced that. And I can remember looking out the window and seeing the trees wave back and forth and the rain blowing sideways, and then the power went off and then the first alarm came in.
I think I remember that.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago, right? It was just about a month ago tomorrow, I guess, in fact. And we ended up responding to about 45 different calls for service over the next 6 to 8 hours.
Wow.
Most of those calls were people reporting electrical wires down or electrical wires arcing, poles that were burning and the like. But we did have one incident that involved a fairly large tree that had crashed into a house. Fortunately, nobody was hurt. So that's normally in connection with natural disasters. High wind is what we're typically worried about, and typically what we're responding to are the consequences of the high wind. We do have some procedures in place whereby for if there are warnings that are out there, the station is alerted to the fact that there's a warning. That would be a tornado warning or a severe thunderstorm warning where the National Weather Service has predicted the possibility of winds as high as 60 miles an hour. When that happens, when either of those happen, the public warning sirens will be sounded, and the fire department will also be alerted that that's in the works, so we can get additional people into the station if we need to and that sort of thing, and be prepared to respond.
Oh, next question. Are you equipped to search and for search and rescue missions?
To some degree we are, yes, but for what we refer to as technical rescue, or sometimes it's referred to as USAR, urban search and rescue, searches within collapse, confined space rescues, and that sort of thing, our department, through our mutual aid association, the Western Wayne County Mutual Aid Association, contributes personnel to and can call on the resources of our mutual aid association's technical rescue team, or USAR team. We have 2 people on our department that are members of that team, and it has members from all of the fire departments, from Novi down to Belleville, and from Dearborn to Northville, basically, in Canton, in terms of east to west. That team has specialized training and specialized equipment and their own specialized trucks that can be called upon. So if we had any kind of significant collapse, while we all have what are referred to as either awareness or operations level abilities, we don't carry all the tools and the highly specialized training that the team does. So it would not make a lot of sense for any one community to invest the time and the equipment and the training necessary to do that. It makes a lot more sense for us to come together as many different departments and form one team, which is what we've done.
Okay. What kind of training do you have to complete to help in a natural disaster?
Well, again, we're typically responding to the consequences
Yeah.
of the disaster more than to the disaster itself. So, as part of our basic firefighter training, we're trained to deal with electrical utility emergencies, natural gas emergencies, those kinds of things that can occur. And we refresh on that training every so often to make sure we haven't forgotten that live electrical lines are not something we want to be touching and that sort of thing. So that's something that's typically covered in the basic firefighter training.
Okay. How do you evacuate people before a natural disaster?
Well,
If it was that severe.
If it was that severe, yeah.
that's not something that we've ever had to
Well,
deal
yeah.
with. We have been involved assisting other departments in the evacuation of people after a natural disaster has created a problem. So, for example, the example I'm thinking about occurred in connection with a senior living facility in Plymouth Township. Brian was there too. And we, along with several other departments, were called to assist. It was January, I believe, and as a result of a snowstorm or some sort of problem, that building lost power. It's a multi-story building, and so they needed assistance in helping to move the residents out of that building into transportation and then off to other facilities. The assisted living facilities have their own sort of mutual aid agreements, if you will, with other such facilities. So, for example, neighboring nursing homes or other senior care facilities could each take a certain number of residents from this facility and put them up basically until the problem was resolved. We haven't. I was going to say we haven't had the. We don't have the hurricane threat here.
Yeah.
And in some parts of the country, obviously, that's the one where you have to really worry about evacuations beforehand. That's just not something we have to deal with.
Like when Sandy happened.
Let's see.
Correct.
Like a lot of these questions have to do with evacuating during a hurricane.
Okay.
So, do you guys still want to ask them, or do you want to go with the other ones?
Well, which one?
Well,
Just,
like when people. Okay, I'll just ask it.
Sure.
When people refuse, are unable to leave, how do you handle? Like,
Sure. Well, we can run into that sort of situation. I mean, when we're dealing with a hazardous situation, it could just be a fire, for example, and you get people maybe that don't want to leave.
to protect their property.
Correct. Well, sometimes it's that, or the example I'm going to think of may or may not be a good one, but there was a fire in a bar. It was actually in the upstairs portion of the bar where there were some apartments, and the bar was still open, and there were people down there having a good time, and they didn't want to leave, and we had a raging fire up above them, and we have to use basically what we do in those situations is that we use as much persuasion as we can. But if somebody is just not getting it, we rely on assistance from our police department to convince them that they really need to move. But I do understand that that is an issue in areas of the country where, even though they're called mandatory evacuations before hurricanes, it's very difficult to enforce because it covers a wide area. And trying to, there just aren't the resources basically in terms of police or even National Guard to make everybody leave. So I understand that's an issue in those communities.
What kind of things do you guys have prepared to locate people that are trapped in a house during a fire?
Okay.
Or other natural.
Or any other natural?
Sure. Well, again, if the house has not collapsed, we have. And a fire is a good example. I mean, that's primarily the hazard that we have to deal with here. We have a tool called a thermal imaging camera. You may have seen these or heard about them. But basically, when a crew is going in with their air packs on and their masks and the hose line, they can also use the thermal imaging camera, and it works off infrared. And so it will not only help us locate the fire, but it will help us locate individuals, humans who may be unconscious or trapped And so, because it's very difficult to see in those
Yeah,
circumstances.
And even like pets too.
Correct, yeah.
And so when this is one of our questions, but when you use that thermal thing,
Yes. We call it a TIC, thermal imaging camera.
So when you use this tick, will it show like warmer temperatures, meaning the fire, and then the cooler temperatures, meaning the people and the pets and
Correct.
everything else?
The warmer temperatures will appear brighter on the screen, and the cooler temperatures will appear darker. And I can show it to you when we're done here. For example, if you were to take it into a dark room, and if Brian was sitting right there, and let's say this was at night and it was dark, there's enough residual heat in the furniture and the walls and things that you'll be able to see them, but they'll be, they'll still be rather dark. But then as you move over to where Brian is, he's a much warmer object than everything else, and so he'll appear bright.